And we are back. Welcome back into the Pigskin Cafe. My name is Hampton Sipper, and I will be your host this evening, guiding you through our college football week 6 preview. And who better to join me tonight than the correspondent at large himself, Graham Haney. Graham, how we doing tonight, man?
Doing good, Hampton. I know something is kind of crazy. I've seen you twice in the past week and a half.
What a
Always enjoyed
treat.
doing that. You're in South Alabama. I'm in Nashville. Just those paths don't always cross very easy, but it's always good to see you. Always good to chat with you. And we do it every week, but it's just kind of more fun to do it in person. So that's the news of the week. I got to see Hampton Sipper twice. So if you're in the
That
chat, go share Hampton Sipper some love.
Absolutely. And I mean, for most people, if you see me 2 times in a week, that would make your year. I mean, it was good seeing you too, Graham. I appreciate it. And we had a good time. That was why we weren't on last week, is
Yep.
because crazy week at work. And then me and my buddy Tyler went to the Miami Dolphins and Cincinnati Bengals game, made a pit stop in Nashville on that Wednesday night, and then kind of headed up on Thursday. So getting a pod in was almost near impossible. But we are back this week, and we're going to recap the week 5 of college football, give a few takeaways on that. Then we're going to talk about Tennessee versus LSU, Mississippi State versus Arkansas, Texas versus Oklahoma, FSU versus NC State, Auburn versus Georgia, and then quickly at the end, because we all know who we're going to pick, Alabama versus Texas A&M. Forgot to put that one in the chat, Graham, but we'll
All right.
give a quick little score prediction to end the show tonight. But I wanted to kick it to you real quick, man. Week 5 was fun. Kind of got into conference play. Alabama Arkansas was a really fun game. Auburn LSU was an entertaining one. Georgia went on the road to Mizzou, had a little bit of turbulence. Was down. They were down 10. Was what kind of grammar expert am I? They were down 10 in the fourth quarter, came back and won that game. What was your biggest takeaway? We do it every week from college football week 5.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, I'm going to the Big 12, which is something where lots of teams are leaving, coming into the Big 12. So I mean, lots of just turnover there. And I mean, a name that's really exploding on the coaching carousel is Lance Leipold at Kansas. I mean, I think my biggest takeaway is that the best team in the Big 12 is not a power team. And by that, I mean, it's not a dynasty program in
Blue
Texas,
blood.
in Oklahoma. Yeah, blue blood's the right word. Baylor, who won the Big 12 last year, it seems like a three-team race. And I mean, I might be speaking too early, but Kansas, Oklahoma State, TCU, those three teams have looked impressive
Mm-hmm.
through the first, I guess, 5 weeks of college football. So, man, I think that's my biggest takeaway is that this is the year of the underdogs. I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway out of the Big 12. Lance Leipold is being rumored for every vacancy that's out there. TCU absolutely throttled Oklahoma. If you watch that game, it was honestly embarrassing that Brent Venables was coaching for Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
The defense was non-existent. And so that meets up to a good matchup this week where I think College Game Day is going to be there
Mm-hmm.
for Kansas and TCU, both undefeated, both ranked. I mean, if you're the Big 12, I don't know if you're loving it or hating it, but the media's looking your way because of a team like Kansas that is a basketball school, no doubt, performing well on the gridiron. So, man, I think that's the big takeaway. With all the craziness going on in college football, that Kansas is undefeated, TCU is undefeated, and Oklahoma State is undefeated. Man, all these teams have exceeded the eye test. And I think that's kind of honestly all you can say about college football through week 5 because a lot of teams haven't matched up with their best teams yet. Rivalry week hasn't come along. So, man, I think that's just what you got to value in the first 5 weeks is the eye test. And several teams have failed it. Oklahoma started off the year well, but had 2 bad weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But Oklahoma State, TCU, Kansas taking over the Big 12. They will not miss Texas and Oklahoma as they transition to the SEC. Hampton, what's your big takeaway from this past week in college football?
Well, I want to touch on the Big 12 really quick because I think that is an excellent point that you made about how the traditional blue blood programs in Texas and Oklahoma aren't at the front of the Big 12 right now. I mean, I think I saw a stat. There are 4 Big 12 matchups this weekend. The only one featuring unranked teams is the Red River Shootout between Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, that
Yeah.
is shocking. I didn't have that on my bingo card
Mm-mm.
going into the year, but that's the beauty of college football. Any program, anywhere, if you hire the right coach, if you develop and recruit good players, you can go to prominence. You can become a prominent program, become the storyline for the first half of the year. I mean, Kansas under Leipold, like you mentioned, I know they haven't beat anybody that's a juggernaut. But this is Kansas, guys. They were
Yeah.
losing to FCS teams a couple years ago, and
Yeah.
under Leipold and Jalen Daniels, who's been really impressive to start the year, they're 5-0. They're welcoming in a Sonny Dykes team in TCU that has also looked really good. I mean, that
Explosive.
Oklahoma TCU game, like you said, Graham, it was over by halftime, and
But
I
halftime, I'd say it was over by the end of the first quarter.
and
What was it like? I mean, I think it was a halftime in every other game, and it was just the end of the
mhm,
first quarter. That's how many points were scored. It was like
mhm.
30 something to 10, maybe. I mean, it was
Yeah, it was
honestly a blowout
bad.
from the beginning.
It was bad, and I think that game, especially Oklahoma's defensive performance, we all know Brent Venables can coach defense.
Yes.
To me, that shows how bad Lincoln Riley left the defensive talent cupboard
Mm,
in Norman, Oklahoma, because that shouldn't happen no matter who they're playing. I mean, because Brent Venables at Clemson had an elite defense year after year after year, and they had good talent there, especially along the defensive front, but never to like probably the level of an Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State type program. And for him to get embarrassed like that is very eye opening, and I think kind of speaks to Lincoln Riley a little bit. But very impressed with the Big 12. Oklahoma State deserves some love too, Graham. Go on the road to Baylor, win 33-25. Spencer Sanders has really elevated his game to another level. He's playing really good to start off the year. So couldn't agree with you more and thought that was an excellent takeaway by you on week 5. My quick takeaway is I'm going to go down to the Southeastern Conference and talk about Ole Miss, Kentucky. Thought that was a really interesting game. Really interesting game. So the spread on that was Ole Miss was favored by 6, welcoming in Kentucky. And I was very surprised by that because I thought Kentucky was the better football team. I actually picked Kentucky
yeah.
due to them going on the swamp week 2 and winning that game in a game that I picked Florida to win, coming off that Utah victory. And they came into Oxford and played a really good game. Levis, I thought was a little bit uneven at times, especially with the O line
Mhm.
not always holding up in protection. He had a couple turnovers that proved to be very costly. One that honestly should have been a targeting call, and I'm not a fan of that rule.
Mhm.
But there's no doubt that he got targeted on his first fumble. The second one, you got to get rid of the ball. You got to either
Yeah.
step up or get rid of the ball in that situation. Not really an excuse for that, but Ole Miss's defense has been very impressive to start off the year. I don't think they're a top 10 unit in the country by any stretch of imagination, but they played that Kentucky run pretty stout and they limited the Kentucky vertical threat. Now, Barian Brown, who is a really impressive true freshman, speed guy, good in the return game, good when you get the ball in his hands, get him some open space. Other than that, Ole Miss kind of stifled
Mhm.
that Kentucky offense, even with the return of Chris Rodriguez, who we texted pregame and talked about how big that was.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed with him. Ole Miss was able to run the ball in Kentucky well, and Jackson Dart made enough plays. Now, shout out to my guy, the Wizard, who me and him joked. I mean, I think Jackson Dart, half the passes he throws are interceptable balls. I
Yeah.
mean, like he throws them right in the defense, and somehow he didn't have 10 picks in that game, but he still at times he shows you that talent, that upside that he has. And I think kind of as the season goes along, that team could kind of get on a roll and be really dangerous when November comes around. So I think both those teams are very, very good. My opinion of either one hadn't really changed. Maybe Ole Miss is gone up a little bit in my eye. I still very much revere Kentucky,
Yeah.
even though I don't. After that game, I don't think Kentucky has a chance to beat a Georgia type
Mhm.
team, just because I don't think they can attack vertically enough, especially with their O-line issues. But really good game. It was a great way to kick off the opening slate at 11 a.m. And I think both teams have very bright futures, kind of going down the middle stretch of the season. So with that, Graham, if we don't have anything else to recap for Week 5, let's look ahead to Week 6, man. Now this weekend is a dang good slate. Now last weekend was too, but there's some matchups on here that really are intriguing, and can't wait to break them down with you. Let's start with Tennessee traveling to LSU, playing at 11 a.m. Very interesting game. Tennessee's riding high. The hype train is on them. And LSU's coming off a win where they barely beat Auburn on the road, but still came back from being down 17 to nothing, and showed a lot of heart, showed some guts and some resiliency. What do you make of this game, Graham? Do you see um, the LSU Tigers getting their big signature win under Brian Kelly, or do you think Tennessee kind of keeps the momentum going?
Yeah, I know that the, game with Auburn was a barn burner, was a close the whole way through, and, some people are like, "Oh, Auburn's so bad," but I do think it's a fairly good win in the fact that it was Brian Kelly's first true road test against another SEC program, and Auburn's not gonna just, bend you know, bend down and let you just take it from them. 'em. They're gonna put up a fight, and they did, and so I think that was good momentum for LSU coming into this game. But I think the biggest aspect of it is it's gonna be an 11 a.m. kickoff, like you said, Hampton. We know that Death Valley in Baton Rouge is loud and crazy, come those, 7 o'clock kickoffs when it's dark and
Mhm.
everybody has had, the day to get, the goods in the
Liddy?
system. Yeah, to get
Yeah.
litty, and so, yeah, I think that if it was a 9 o'clock game, I definitely think LSU would have a shot of winning it because it was at home. But I think with this 11 o'clock kick, I think Tennessee's gonna be able to come out fast. And me and you are both high on Tennessee. LSU has had bright moments, had bad moments. Their problem is they're not consistently even throughout. They're either really good or they're really bad. And so I just don't think that LSU coming off a win like that against Auburn, where they had to kind of use more than they probably expected to be
Mhm.
able to take on a team like Tennessee, and that high-powered offense. That's not where LSU is strong. They're strong on defense. They want you to make it a one-score game, and then they'll have a chance. And that's the players that Brian Kelly has at LSU right now. Don't know what type of recruiting he wants to do, but Tennessee just has a lot of pieces that are dangerous for LSU. I just think that's the key of the game. I think Hendon Hooker at 11 a.m. is probably going to be better than Jaden Daniels at 11 a.m. in Baton Rouge. But you never know. It is Death Valley, so anything can happen. Hampton, what do you think about that?
I agree with your analysis. There are a few things that I kind of want to point out about this game that I think we need to keep in mind. Number one, I could see this being a trap game for Tennessee, and I say this because what's next week? Alabama, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I could see Tennessee peaking a little bit toward that game, and it kind of this game not catching them by surprise. But I mean, it's college football. It's natural for some teams to kind of look ahead to an opponent. And
Yeah.
Tennessee had beat Alabama in 15 years. So I could see that being a little bit of a factor.
Mhm.
Now, beyond the external things that we can't really quantify or qualify, I do think it's interesting that LSU last week, they did beat Auburn, but I don't even think they amassed 250 yards of total offense. I mean, Jaden Daniels threw for like 80 yards.
Yeah.
They didn't run the ball very effectively. I mean, they won that game because Auburn kept turning the ball over.
Yeah.
I mean, Robbie Ashford threw for like 350 yards on this LSU defense, and they won because of turnovers. And I think Tennessee's offense is much better than Auburn's.
Yep.
And I think they're going to be able to kind of get a little momentum going into that matchup next week. I think they can exploit that LSU defense. And then for LSU on offense, Jane Daniels kind of came out of that game against Auburn hurt. He was a little hobbled. And you and I both know, Graham, if his legs are not available to him, he's not the same player. And even with his legs available to him, I don't think he's a top-tier quarterback in the SEC because he very much relies on if something's not there to be able to scramble. And I don't think he can consistently beat you from within the pocket. So I don't think Tennessee's defense is stout. I don't think they're all that great. And LSU might have some success running the ball on them. But in the end, I think Tennessee's more talented. They have the better quarterback, and their offense will exploit that LSU defense. And I've got Tennessee in one closer than the experts think.
Yeah.
So we both got Tennessee on this one.
Yeah, and you got to remember Tennessee's coming off a bye week,
That
so
too.
they're going to be rested. They're going to be healthy, and I think that gives them the edge as well. LSU, tough road opponent, but I think, and like you said, we both agree on it. Tennessee has too many pieces on offense. Their scheme's too good, and if you can't really move the ball against Auburn, you're going to struggle against lots of other teams in the SEC. But a win is a win, however you can take it. But we think this one's going to go to Tennessee.
And last note, I'm very interested to see if Cedric Tillman, the stud receiver from Tennessee, plays in this game. They didn't really need him against Florida. I mean, they still put up a bunch of yards, a bunch of points against Florida without him, but he adds a different dimension to that offense. So I'll be very curious to see if he suits up this week or they wait another week and get him back for that big Alabama game. Let's move on to, honestly, the most sneaky, interesting matchup of the weekend. Two teams we were very high on in the preseason who have kind of proved us right and kind of proved us wrong a little bit. Arkansas traveling to Starkville, Mississippi, to play the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Mississippi State coming off a win against Texas A&M where they dominated. Arkansas coming off a loss to Alabama where Jalen Milroe comes in the game and scores 35 points. And, I mean, you kind of lead that game. Alabama dominated for the majority of that game other than the third quarter. So I'm very interested to see kind of how that Arkansas team bounces back. And I know we did a whole reaction to that with our good friend Jimmy Stein from Locked On Bama and the Bama Insider at BamaOn3.com. So if you haven't checked that episode out, be sure to do so. But Graham, what do you make of this game, man? These are two teams we were high on. Like I mentioned, coming into the year, Mississippi State being our dark horse team. Do you think they get it done at home and give Arkansas, surprisingly, their third SEC loss?
I think they do. I mean, short and simple. I think they do. Hampton, me and you were both high on Arkansas to begin the year, and they've got good pieces, but the defense is concerning. And the fact that they're really awful against the pass. If they don't sack you, you're gonna make plays through the air. And what does Mike Leach like to do? Throw the ball. So, man, I think it's a really poor matchup for Arkansas. I think Mississippi State's a place where the defense is always underrated. If it's not, if they're not, winning elite games, then they're always gonna, underrate Mississippi State's defense. I think Mississippi State has this one, and the fact that Arkansas is not good on the air, not good in the air. Will Rogers has had a good year so far, and Mississippi State's 3-0 at home. Just really put it to Texas A&M, who Arkansas lost to the week before. I think there's a couple reasons for that, but I think mostly it's A&M survived a game they shouldn't have against Arkansas. And so they come in kind of coasting into Mississippi State, into Starkville, and Mike Leach and Mississippi State said, we're a big dog. We're ready to hunt. And man, Texas A&M's offense is still awful. But Mississippi State looked well. They forced turnovers. They were able to score, off of those turnovers and execute. I think Will Rogers and a Eufaula connection and Ra Thomas, receiver for Mississippi State, I just think that might be too much for Arkansas. We don't know if KJ Jefferson will play. I think coming off a concussion, and
Mm,
playing against a physical Alabama team, like and getting beat the way that they did was kind of disheartening. I think is one of those where not they're going to pout like their way into this game, but man, that last game was hurt. You're still trying to recover and practice this week, so whenever you're making it into game prep for Mississippi State, you're still thinking about that ankle that might have gotten tweaked or that rib that got just a helmet to it right there. So I think in Starkville, I got to go with Mississippi State. Hampton, we talked about them being one of these underdog teams that they could really prove us wrong. I think they have, and they've had
mhm,
favorable matchups. And Arkansas is just entering a tough stretch of games. They play A&M, they play Alabama, and the off week seems to be Mississippi State. Mississippi State is kind of playing their best ball right now.
mhm. I agree. I mean, I would love to offer up a not so fast, my friend, a counterpoint, but I really can't,
Mhm.
especially if KJ Jefferson doesn't play this game, Arkansas is simply not winning.
Oh no.
And I think the only way Arkansas really does win this game, if he does play, is if he puts on that Superman cape and they run the ball very effectively, because they are not effective enough in the passing game right now
Hmm.
to go blow for Mississippi State, especially with the fact of you mentioned their defense. Their defense has been pretty good to
Yeah.
start off the year. I mean, they've been really good. The only blemish they have really is when they played LSU and they allowed, I think, 2 touchdowns and maybe a field goal in the fourth quarter. And a lot of that really didn't have to do with them. It had to do with their offense going 3 and out 6 times in a row. And then a muffed punt that gave LSU a short field. And then they could never kind of get their wind back under them after that point.
Hmm.
So I think they match up pretty well with Arkansas on defense. But then on their offense, I mean, Will Rogers, you know what I think of him. I think he's a top 5 quarterback in the SEC. And he's looking at that Arkansas secondary, and he wants, to roast that pig, man. I mean, he
Yeah.
wants to roast that pig. And I think they're going to be able to. I think there's a lot of favorable matchups there, especially with Mike Leach coordinating that offense, but also they've been able to run the ball pretty effectively too. I think they ran for about like 150 on A&M, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, they had success on the ground. So you pair that with the prolific passing attack they have, I think they're just too much, especially at home. So give me Mississippi State. And I mean, they play Alabama in 2 weeks. That's going to be a very interesting matchup in Tuscaloosa if they come into that game with only one loss. So that's going to be the end of a tough 4-game schedule for Alabama, and Mississippi State might look for an opportune time to pull an upset. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, folks, but they're a really good team, and I think
Yeah.
Mike Leach has done a good job in that program. Now, let's go rapid fire a little bit. So we broke down those 2 games. I think those are the 2 most interesting matchups of the weekend. Let's talk Texas OU, Graham. Who do you have in this one?
I'm going with Texas. Dylan Gabriel got hurt in that TCU game, and the
Bad. That
bad.
was a rough hit, man.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the definition of targeting. He was sliding and got his head taken off. So if he's not playing for Oklahoma, that offense struggles and did struggle big time. Um, I think that Quinn Ewers is targeted to come back this week in the Red River Showdown, and I think Texas will win because they're kind of getting out of the conversation, and that's one of those games where Sark has that good game plan and they're able to expose Oklahoma's defense, which is the pieces are there, the answers are there. It's easy to see, and I think Texas is going to take it away. Last year, I think this was the game where Oklahoma scored that rushing touchdown, like that 35-yard rushing touchdown late to go ahead and beat Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think this is Texas' game. I think that the matchup favors them if they can play to their highest level. Oklahoma's still a good team. Like we're not sitting here and saying they're you know very average, but without Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma has some question marks on offense. Give me Texas.
I'll disagree with you a little bit. I don't know if I would call Oklahoma a good team anymore, man. I mean, Kansas State beats you, and I mean, I know they're kind of rounding into form a little bit with Adrian Martinez having a late career resurgence. Good for him. But TCU just absolutely embarrassing you
Yep.
like they did. I can't call you a good team. And I don't think
Sure.
Texas is elite, but I think, like you mentioned, Sark is a master game planner. He will be able to exploit that OU defense. I've got Texas by at least 10 points. I think this game's always kind of close, but I think they've got more talent and they've got more answers and can exploit the weaknesses of that OU defense and even their offense. So
Yeah.
give me the Longhorns in this one. Next game we got on the docket, FSU traveling to NC State, coming off a rough loss against Wake Forest at home. Graham, who do you have in this one?
Yeah, NC State played a tough game against Clemson, but they're going home, so I'm going to take NC State. Florida State's played fairly well this year, and Wake Forest is a good team. So is Clemson. So I think I got NC State. I think they're a little sour. That game day was there on an away game, and they upset Clemson last year. So I think they're going to get back into form. And NC State, I mean, their coaches and players have said that's the best team that NC State will ever has.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they've been saying. So um, I got to go with NC State. I think the home crowd's going to make a difference, and I think this will be the really not the first road test for Florida State because they did play in New Orleans, but
Played
if
Louisville on the road
yeah,
on Friday night.
yeah, but a Saturday night crowd of NC State Wolfpack fans, I got to go with NC State. But I think it's going to be a close one. I think that Florida State is not better than people give them credit for because I think they've gotten enough credit. But
Mm-hmm.
Florida State's not a cakewalk, and they weren't for Wake Forest either. I mean, there was like Wake Forest did kind of take over the game. I think NC State will do the same, but don't expect it to be a blowout by any means.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that. I'd love to pick Florida State here. I've been very impressed with the job Norvell has done this year. Jordan Travis has taken another step in his third year of starting, but I think that FSU is missing some guys on defense. Apparently, two key contributors along that defensive front. I think that's going to hurt them. I'm not sure if they're back for this week or not, but I think NC State, like you said, have a sour taste in their mouth after Clemson kind of dominated them for the most part, was very much in control of that game. Behind the home crowd, Devin Leary at quarterback. Give me NC State. Auburn, Deep South's oldest rivalry, traveling to Athens, Georgia. Georgia coming off a very disappointing performance, really a disappointing 2 weeks where they've showed some chinks in the armor. That defense hasn't been all world like everybody thought. I mean, they looked kind of beatable. Missouri had a good game plan of kind of taking away the tight ends and making Stetson have to make plays elsewhere. And Georgia's O-line and running game are very much lacking. But they're coming home. They're welcoming in Auburn, who's limping into this game. I think their center said that they think they can dominate Georgia, which bold strategy there, Cotton. Hope it pays off for you.
Don't want to give them any ammo.
Yeah, I mean, you're in no position to talk, but I get I don't I'm speechless to even talk about why that center would say that, but here we are. So they're traveling in. Do you think Auburn has any chance to keep it within 30?
They might can keep it within 30 because Georgia has really stalled on offense the past 2 weeks, and they beat Kent State, and I'm not really going to factor that game into much. Georgia has nothing to play for against Kent State. Kent State has everything to play for. Missouri is an SEC opponent, but Georgia's far more talented.
Missouri's a bad football team.
Yeah,
They are a bad football team.
yeah, you in the SEC you expect good units with elite players. And Missouri has a few, to say they're elite players is not probably true. Really good players, but their units on offense and defense are not good. No, I agree with you on that side. But it was a night game at Mizzou in Columbia, so you got to factor that in just a little bit. But this is kind of becoming not a rivalry anymore, in my opinion. Like it's been since 2017 since Auburn beat Georgia, and so
And that was the second, or that was the first time where they blew them out. That's
yeah,
right. Yep.
and so I mean you could make the argument for several other rivalries in the SEC,
Mm-hmm.
but I just think not many people on Georgia's team or Auburn's team were around then, so the expectation is for Georgia to dominate Auburn. And I think they will. I don't think it's going to be a 30-point blowout. I think Auburn probably covers that spread because that's a lot of points for an SEC team. And Auburn is still an SEC program. Um, and so I think Auburn makes enough plays to stay under the 30-point blowout, but Georgia is going to win this one handedly. Auburn doesn't have many weapons to make Georgia fearful, but Georgia is not playing their best football right now, but neither is Auburn. So you got to take the teams more talented in that aspect. So I'll take Georgia easily.
I got to give credit to where I heard this, and it was a clip on Twitter from Crane and Company and Blaine Crane. But Joe Biden has a better chance of getting out of a fun house than Auburn does to keep this game close. Um, I thought that was a great line and very true. But Auburn does not match up well with Georgia. The only chance they have is maybe their opening script. They come out and Robbie Ashford makes a few plays with his legs. But overall, I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball consistently. I think defensively, they don't match up well with Georgia. I think Brock Bowers is going to have a heyday, have another signature game. And I think this might be Brian Harson's last stand, especially if it gets really ugly. I can see them firing him after this game. And then Auburn starts the head coach search circus again. And I think Georgia is going to have a bad taste in their mouth after the performance they put on film the past 2 weeks. So give me Georgia in a blowout. Now, before we go, Alabama hosting Texas A&M. This was supposed to be the game of the year. It was going to be really fun because of the Jimbo Nick Saban feud in the offseason, but Alabama held up its end of the bargain. Jimbo, well, he did not. So, Graham, what's your score prediction? I know you're going to pick Alabama, even with Jalen Milroe playing, or if it's Bryce Young playing. Give me a score prediction for this one, and maybe give me a player of the game. Make it
Sure.
a little more interesting.
Yeah, you and Jimmy talked about this one very thoroughly, so I'm not gonna preach to the choir.
Mm-hmm.
I think Alabama is gonna be dominant on both sides. I'm gonna go Alabama. Let's go 45 to 17, 45-17. Alabama wins. I think that Texas A&M just still hasn't figured it out on offense, but I think A-Chain will make enough plays to get A&M in the end zone. And Jimbo's going to use all of his bits and pieces of game planning to try and at least give Alabama some fits. But I think Alabama's going to return the favor in Bryant Denny. Man, I think the difference in the game is going to be Henry To'oTo'o. And I think because that is A&M's offense is not good like we've been saying. But if To'oTo'o can stop A-Chain from explosive plays, from breaking that 30-yard run, let him get the first down, stop him at 12. Take the good angle, stop him at 12, make him go the distance of the field. And I think that is going to go through To'oTo'o's his area because I like Will Anderson, I like Dallas Turner coming off the edge, but I think, like I said, A-Chain's going to be the one that's going to make plays for him, and his big plays are going to make it to the second level. So I think To'oTo'o is going to have to come up big, shirp some big tackles, and that'll keep A&M out of the end zone if he does that. What do you think, Hampton?
I've got Alabama 38-10. I think even with Milroe at quarterback, I think they're too much. I think there's going to be an added level of motivation because of the offseason
Yeah,
back and forth. And I think a lot of them remember last year, and they have a bad taste in their mouth for how many of the star players played, including Will Anderson, who did not have a great game against Texas A&M. I'm very interested to see the type of adjustments Pete Golding makes against Jimbo. Because one thing last year that was exploited heavily was Jimbo would run his running back out of the backfield and force that outside linebacker, whether it be Will Anderson, whether it be Dallas Turner, to go into coverage on a running back, and they would just nickel and dime that to
Yeah.
death. And then at one point, they got him matched up with Christian Harris, and Calzada threw a dime down the field and had a big chunk play. So I'm interested to kind of see that chess match a little bit. But ultimately, I don't think their line's good. I don't think their quarterback play's been great. And other than A-Chain on that offense, I don't think they have a difference maker beside maybe Evan Stewart, who has a lot of promise, but I don't think he has shown that he is this incredible receiver to this point. And then defensively, they're going to make Alabama throw the ball, make Jalen Milroe become a passer, but ultimately I think he's going to be able to do enough through the passing game to really blow this game open. I'm hoping for a 59-0 2014 style
Yeah.
blowout. I would love that, but I'm going to go 38-10. Alabama wins, and they head in to Tennessee 6-0, facing the Tennessee Volunteers. They'll be 5-0 because they're going to have, they've had their bye week.
Yeah.
And that game is going to be mighty, mighty interesting, especially if Bryce Young cannot play in that game. But we'll talk about that next week. Graham, it was a pleasure having you join me tonight. Talk a little college football week 6. If this is your first time listening to Pigskin Cafe, we appreciate you joining us so much. Please hit that subscribe button. Ooh, I butchered that. This subscribe button. Leave us a like, leave us a comment, and hit that notification bell. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, along with our social media platforms at the Pigskin Cafe, where you can see reels from our show, polls, and any other pertinent information that we have going on there. We will be back next week to recap week 6. Graham, we're halfway through after this week. Can't believe it, but we'll be back to recap week 6 and look ahead to week 7. But the Pigskin Cafe is closed for now. Until next time, chew on that.